Well, good morning, everyone. June 10th. I'm here, Claudia Pasmani, Executive Director of the Amherst Area Chamber of Commerce. Welcome. Thank you to Pearson Wallace Insurance, who is our presenting sponsor for this three-part series. This is part two, and they are also our presenters today. So we have Beth Pearson, the president of Pearson Wallace. We have Alex Bennett, vice president and partner, Paul Lenahan, vice president, and along with them, joining them is John Koppelman, the senior workers' compensation consultant from Renaissance Alliance. And I just want to say Beth is a valued board member, an ambassador for the chamber, so she's been an incredible partner. So thank you, Beth. Pearson Wallace Insurance is also a local business specializing both here in Amherst and throughout the Berkshires, specializing in policy customization for each customer. So it's both business and personal. I'm going to let Beth take it away, and she can do the introductions and take all your questions. Thanks, Beth.
Beth, if you could just unmute. There you go.
So thank you, Claudia, and thank you for this amazing opportunity to open up this concept that you and I came up with to help our community, our clients, and the managers out there running organizations with the COVID and the re-entry to reopening of their businesses. So as I mentioned last week, this is really a very, very, very challenging time, and I'm taking the perspective with my business and consulting with my clients on the fact that this is an opportunity to kind of rewrite your dreams, even though your dreams may have slightly changed, and also revamp your business plans to have a process in place for the kind of the new normal that we're in as we work through the 4 phases of reopening your business. So I'm pleased today to be joined by some of our staff at Pearson Wallace, and also a external consultant that we work with on workers' comp. So Alex Bennett is the VP of marketing and sales, as well as a partner in our agency. Cole Lenahan is our VP of operations, and then John Koppelman joins us as a senior workers' compensation consultant with the Renaissance Alliance Group, and he has 30 years. John, is that right? 30 years in the industry around specialization of workers' comp. So he's a very valued resource. So with that being said, I think the way that we'd like to run this format, and we'll see how it works. This worked pretty well last week with Bacon and Wilson, Claudia, is that we will. People can ask questions in the chat function. The chat function is located on the bottom of your toolbar, and Cole will be interjecting those questions as they are pertinent to the slide, or letting you know if we're going to address them later on in the presentation. So we rather like to make this rather informal and just open dialogue. This event will be recorded, and the slides will be also shared through the Amherst Area Chamber website, so that you can share it with your clients or share it with other people to refer back to it at a later date. So jumping right in, we have a series of different slides that we'll be presenting this morning, but the general agenda, again, it's loose and will be based on where people would like to take this, is the general considerations that we're going to be talking about today. So the general platform of things as you're getting ready to reopen, or if you have reopened, things that you might want to go back and revisit. The second agenda item is workers' compensation. John Koppelman will be talking about that. And I reversed the order here. We're going to talk about business interruption after that. That's obviously a very hot topic, and one that's very controversial, and we have some pretty sound advice from some attorneys on how to handle that. So I'd like to get into some detail on that. The fourth item is employment practices liability. This is an important coverage to have in place for your practices as you bring people back to work, so you don't get any hookups or hangups with your employees for not following certain standards. Then Alex is going to talk about a little premium relief, and then we'll be done. So I have a tendency to talk way too fast. So if I'm talking too fast, please tell me to slow down my pace. Sorry about that. Okay, so here's the things we'd like to cover in terms of coverage issues and policyholder perspectives. So as I mentioned, rewriting your business plan is is, I think, of utmost importance right now as you try to match your business plan with your new business model. And insurance, as everyone knows, is a really important financial tool. So you have your, you have your CPA, you have your attorney, and then you have, a person who manages your assets for you. A fourth part of that is super important that some people don't consider, but maybe should think about in the future, is just utilizing insurance as a financial tool. It protects your assets. So you want to make sure that your assets are understood by your agent and understood by yourself. So as you're using your insurance product as a financial tool, it's important to understand what's involved in your insurance policies. And as I mentioned, it's really time for a review and maybe clearly understand some important coverages like business interruption coverage. I have a situation where last week, Alex and I were visiting a very large restaurant here in the Berkshires, and we were talking to him about business interruption and filing a claim. So he was rifling through all the pages of his policy, and we got to the section around business interruption, and there was a big no next to it. So that meant that he did not have any business interruption coverage. The carrier the year before did have it, but his insurance agent had rewritten the policy with a different carrier, and that was not a standalone standard option of business interruption. So now he has a $4 million restaurant business and absolutely no business interruption coverage. So it's just important to make sure that you have it in there. That's, again, just an example. So, our philosophy right now is every bit of improvement you take to your policies, both refining them, improving them will set your business up for success. So the things that we just want to quickly touch base on, we're not going to talk about them in great detail, but the important things to make sure you're considering on your policies are your general liability limits, the right limits. Are they 1 million, 2 million, or maybe they should be 2 million, 4 million in liability limits? Is your property clearly defined? Do you understand how much inventory you have, business, personal property? Is your building adequately covered? Those are some of the considerations there. Business interruption, really understanding what you have and making sure it's available on your policy. Workers' compensation, John's going to talk a little bit about that, but making sure your classification codes are correct and your limits are today's standards. So typically people had 500,000, 500,000, 500,000 disease policy limits and per employee. We're recommending now that everyone have a million across the board. So those are things, and honestly, the change in premiums is very, very small to increase those limits. Then also an umbrella is always really important. That sits on top of your commercial auto. And then the employment practices, liability, and cyber. Many people don't have those policies in place, but they are out there if people are interested. So that's that piece. The other thing to consider as you're opening your business or have reopened is your COVID preparedness plan. So we're going to share with you some posters in a moment, but it's really important to educate your staff and use these posters as your base tool. Actually, we're going to hop off this slide, and Cole's going to show you what the posters look like briefly. And we have these available to us. We can drop them off to you, or we also can make arrangements to drop them at the chamber. So Cole, can you show the employer COVID educational poster that the state is requiring? So this is just, can you make it into full screen, please? So this is just an example of what the employer guidance tool looks like. People are posting this in their workers' comp sections of their workplaces so that all employees can understand what is required of the employer as well as the employee. This is also a good standard to build into your SOPs or your HR benefits policies, it's just super important to use this as you're baselining your employees to come back to work. So that's one poster. Again, these are available. We can get them to you however you'd like us to send them. The second one is the employee guide. And that one is just one that allows you to have a specific discussion with each one of your employees. So we are recommending that you review this, maybe add a signature line at the bottom, so that everyone acknowledges what they are responsible to do. Then the third slide, Cole. Let's go to the control plan. So Massachusetts and Charlie Baker's organization has done an amazing job by creating this control plan document. It's important to just have that in your folder, files, on your laptop, etc. So there's just a series of questions that you answer, and then on the back side you sign it. And if you have a Board of Health person that comes in, or the Department of Labor, and they want to see your control plan, you have this set aside. So just real quick on that, if we can jump back, Cole. Okay, so we talked about consistent practices throughout the work environment, lead by example. So if you are the manager and you take your mask down in the middle of a meeting, that's just not necessarily a good practice. As I mentioned, you might want to include the COVID requirements in your operating manual. We also recommend you put links to the CDC and the HWO organization, the WHO organization. These can be live links that you can incorporate into your benefits policies and procedures. The reason why it's recommended they be live links because it's a constantly dynamic situation. We will do that, Claudia. Thank you. And then there's legislation that's evolving. John's going to talk a little bit about that. So those are kind of the policy coverage issues and policy considerations as the backdrop to all of this. So next slide, Cole. Okay, so now I'm going to hand this over to John Koppelman. As I mentioned, he's a 30-year veteran in the world of workers' compensation, has seen significant changes, and he has some really great advice for us here as it relates to helping save on your premiums and just the process to make sure you're reporting correctly on the claims that might be coming through your organization. So, John?
Thank you very much. Great to be here with you this morning. Workers' compensation is making a number of adjustments due to COVID-19. So the rules that have been long in place about how they collect premium and what the different protocols are a little bit different now. I wanted to talk about a few of those. But perhaps I prefaced my remarks that with those of you who participated in the Bacon and Wilson event last week, they raised a lot of really interesting technical problems, and I would welcome specific kinds of problems that you might be facing with individuals. I think we're small enough to handle some of those questions in the course of this seminar. Some of you may have employees who are not working, but are still being paid. They used to call these idle workers. For those employers who have shut down, and this goes back to the beginning of March, you don't owe premiums on people who are being paid not to work. That's really what it comes down to. But in order to implement this, you need, perhaps through your agent, to contact your carrier. And this would be case by case. It might not be all of your employees, but some of your employees may be essentially not asked to work, but still kept on the payroll. So you want to establish a start date for this, and it can be retroactive back to the beginning of March, and the projected end date. And when you do this, the carrier is going to change the class code, whatever the class code of your employees might be, whether it's clerical or contracting or whatever it might be. And they will sign class code 0012, which once it goes into that class code, there is no premium collected. So the payroll is still generated. You're still signed up for workers' compensation, but the employees who are not working go into this 0012 class code. The key thing here is if you access this program you want to make sure you stop it when people are actually going to be back to work. And sometimes this might be a casual situation where you might have one of your, in a contracting kind of business where you send somebody out to the job site to check on a site that's been dormant but about to start up. You really want them covered by the time they go out the door. So you don't want to let that 0012 class code extend in when people are doing any kind of work at all. So you need to notify the carrier, perhaps through your agent, that people are back to work and they go into their standard class code. I don't know how many of you are in this situation, but if you are, we could talk about it later. Reporting a COVID-related illness. Obviously, as with anything that may involve workers' compensation, you want to notify your carrier. The bottom line here is that it's not going to cost you anything if somebody is diagnosed with the virus. The lost wages, the medical bills will not count against your experience rating, assuming that you are experience rated. These costs will be, they'll tap into the national funds, the federal funds that have been set aside. Presumably, they haven't really resolved that, but it's not your problem. If you have employees with the COVID virus, they will not impact your future costs. Next slide, please. Now, here's an interesting little possible problem. If somebody gets ill in your workplace, and Beth has talked about the very elaborate protocols that are required of all employers to protect their employees. If you fail to do this in an egregious sort of way, for example, you have an employee who shows up without a mask, refuses to wear a mask, continues to work side by side with other people who are wearing masks, and you don't do anything about it, I would say that might come under the heading of willful intent. Your failure to discipline and remove that employee from the workplace may be reach that level of willful intent on the part of the employer by not protecting that worker and other workers in this situation. Workers' comp is no fault. It generally doesn't matter whether you got hurt due to your own carelessness or the act of a coworker. But there is a Section 28 of the statute that says that if there is willful intent on the part of the employer, this overrides the no-fault protection, and the benefits, which would be the paid lost wages and the medical payments, will be doubled. So if the normal claim would have been $10,000 in indemnity and $10,000 in medical bills, that becomes $20,000 in wages and $20,000 in medical bills. With that half, that penalty half, will be paid out of the pocket of the employer. So this is serious stuff. Quite frankly, this doesn't happen very often, but there are always attorneys out there looking to stir up some business, and I think this is one that's lurking in the shadows here. So when you set up your protocols and people sign off on them, you want to make sure you follow through. If it's an inadvertent thing that whether it's not willful, you will not be held to this double liability situation. But if you ignore things that you shouldn't ignore, it may well become something you have to deal with.
John, I apologize to interrupt,
Yeah.
but we had a pretty particular question here that'll piggyback right off of your point. And Alex had asked, are there any precautionary measures that workers' comp carriers are recommending to business owners right now in terms of protecting themselves, insuring against potential claims, so on and so forth?
Yeah, I think that your protection is in following the protocols that have been established. As Beth points out, there The state has been very proactive in this case, telling you, these checklists are real. This is what you need to be doing. And I think that the carriers would simply say, if you follow that, you should be okay. Where we get into some, one of the particular issues I'm concerned about is I love the idea of a reentry interview one-on-one with all of your employees to find out what their concerns are. For example, if you have older employees who are at greater risk and perhaps they have compromising physical problems that they may or may not want to talk about, but they're afraid that they are at higher risk for succumbing to the virus, that's where the whole reasonable accommodation process kicks in. And my advice there is to listen carefully to the concerns of the employee. And if you cannot provide a workspace for them that's safe, ideally they can work from home as they've probably been doing all along. But in any event, you don't want to force people into a situation where they believe they are at higher risk. And that's a discussion. That's not an easy discussion, but it's definitely one you need to follow. So I would say two things, Cole, to that question. One is follow the protocols, and two, customize it to each employee and be aware of the needs of each employee, and in terms of what work needs to be done and what the circumstances are for doing it. These are not easy things, mind you. These are not easy things, but these are things we all need to be aware of. Finally, for workers' compensation, I wouldn't say finally, but in this particular presentation, I want to talk a little bit about what the legislature's contemplating. There are things going on nationally. There are things going on in individual state legislatures. The most important ones here in Massachusetts are mirrored by other states, that they want to make sure that frontline workers and essential workers are covered by workers' compensation. Historically, insurance companies have been very reluctant to consider illnesses as compensable. There have been long, drawn-out fights in the court systems around asbestos exposures or chemical exposures. And generally, those are illnesses that take a long time to develop. The COVID-19 is very different. It shows up right away. So there's the move in the legislature is to provide presumptive coverage for frontline workers. That means that the burden of proof will not be on the employee to prove that they got the illness at work. The burden of proof would be on the defense side to prove that they did not get it at work. Obviously, for frontline workers, it's going to be pretty easy to prove that the frontline exposure is what is the source of the illness, even if you can't trace it exactly. But how do you define frontline? I mean, we all know that EMTs are going to be included, that frontline workers, through the intake and hospitalization of people who are seriously ill, but also under essential workers, we find grocery stores, delivery services, home health care workers. It's not clear whether these people will be in the presumptive coverage. We simply need to keep an eye on the legislation to see what actually comes out from it. This is a moving, all the bills are in committee. Nothing has been sent to the governor for signature, but I assume there will be some bills sent to the governor. And my assumption is that it will be limited to the frontline healthcare workers. It gets a little dicey when you open it up to, say, grocery store people. It's a much more open-ended exposure, and once they are presumptive, it's going to seriously impact the number of people who are actually included under the COVID-19 under workers' compensation. So we'll see, and we are tracking this, and we'll be communicating back through Pearson Wallace any developments in this area.
Thanks, John. And one other great question that Claudia had proposed. You had mentioned a re-entry interview.
Yeah.
Is there a form? Is there something that we as insurance agents or anybody as a business owner could, use as a reference to when they're interviewing a client or an employee rather?
Well, I'll tell you the thing that I'm not aware of a form at this point. The key thing to be aware of is the Americans with Disabilities Act and the sensitivity of people who have physical conditions that may impact their vulnerability to the COVID. You can't probe about this, but you can listen if somebody volunteers it. So you are not allowed to ask, well, have you ever had diabetes, or do you have diabetes, or do you have a heart condition? But if an employee comes to you with concerns about their own safety and they raise the issue, then you're in a position to at least talk about the accommodation process. But you need to be careful. The way you do it is you ask open-ended questions such as, we're reopening the office. People are going to be returning to work. Do you have any concerns, specific concerns about being back in the workplace? And see whether or not they even if, for example, somebody has a heart condition, but they choose not to raise it with you, I wouldn't probe any further than that. I think you have to respect their ability to define the parameters of whether they feel comfortable showing up in the office or not. Okay.
Understood. And John, as like an example, say I have asthma and I'm, I tell my employer I'm comfortable wearing a mask all day, being in whatever such business that I work in, and then for some reason, because of my asthma and because the mask is on all day, I end up having, say, an asthma attack or fainting or something terrible happens because I'm wearing the mask. How would a workers' compensation carrier, or how would that even go about in terms of the claim associated with it?
I think the claim would, the claim would be accepted. Where you might have a problem would be if somebody failed to disclose this. They have some issues and they're a little nervous about coming back to work. And by the way, I really hate this mask and I need to take it off periodically because I don't want to have it on because it's not comfortable. As with anyone who refuses to wear the mask in the workplace, that's a problem and that's subject to discipline. And not only do you want to document it to show that you have a credible policy that people must wear masks, and that way, if something were to happen later, for example, it would be a part of the discipline process if somebody refused to wear the mask, and you would ask them to essentially leave the premises until they're ready to wear a mask. And if you don't do that, then you've opened the door to a broader expanse of potential liability. So it's one thing to have a policy; it's another thing to enforce it, and you need to have both going. If you feel that you have an employee that's really at high risk, that's grounds for a serious discussion with that individual, and you can present those risks to that employee. For example, somebody who's in their mid-70s and with a history of known heart problems, you gently need to see if there's a way to make sure that they're comfortable with the accommodation in returning to work, whatever form that might take. And it might be at home, might be that they've been working at home. We'll keep you at home without anything being punitive about that. You have to keep a safe workplace. That's always a challenge. I would say it's now a challenge on steroids in this particular environment.
Thank you, John. I appreciate it. I think Beth might have a question as well.
Paul, I just wanted to clarify one point that John made. There's an accommodation policy now being put in place for people who need extra accommodations due to health concerns. So we weren't necessarily going to be talking about that today. Bacon Wilson last week talked specifically about that policy language and change. But if you'd like to have some more consideration on that, please feel free to reach out to me and I can put you in contact with the right resources about those accommodations. So you don't necessarily want to bring them up so early in the game, but it's important, again, for that to be built into your policies and procedures. And I guess to answer your question, Cole, in terms of the asthma person, if they had an issue at work, then yes, the claim should be their agent and their insurer should fill out a claim notification. There's a specific form to follow for a work-related injury or work-related claim, and that needs to be added to the state as well as to your agent as well as your insurance company. So in the case that Cole talked about, we actually had an employee that fainted at work yesterday, and so that was a real life situation, and Cole, that was great to bring that up, so thank you. Okay, next slide. This is just an unprecedented conversation, and it's not a, it's one of those times where it's really challenging for me to deliver the news that business interruption coverage is just currently not available as the language and the policy states today under today's considerations. There is several different bills being talked about or potentially proposed. There are insurance carriers who are trying to figure out if they can provide a stopgap measure for a business interruption claim. And so those are all things that are being worked out. And so what I wanted to talk about specifically was the fact that what business interruption coverage typically covers people for, and it's a direct physical loss of damage to their property or their described premise. There's a bunch of considerations about that associated with, due to COVID, there was a direct physical loss where people actually had to leave their place of employment and people were not actually able to shop or eat out or do much of anything in life. And so really maybe the COVID quarantine could be prescribed as a direct physical loss and damage to the property. So that's one group of attorneys who believe that may be a loophole in the policy. There's another piece is whether or not there might be a class action lawsuit filed. Legal Seafood in Boston actually has a class action lawsuit that has been started. Their particular policy listed all perils. It also, which means that it lists all types of different claim scenarios that are typically covered. The problem with Legal Seafood is that their policy renewed right around the end of March, early April, and there was no specific discussion about COVID and loss of income and disease being excluded. So I think it was all those factors combined that Legal Seafood has decided to take a class action lawsuit, and they're in consortium with all the restaurant organizations nationally to try to figure out this class action lawsuit. So that's another piece out there. So with those two pieces sort of being potential holes, we are recommending that people go ahead and put a claim in. And I don't have a slide for this specifically, but we could talk about it offline, or I can do more detail if anyone has any questions. But basically, you want to put your carrier and your agent on formal notice that you will be filing a claim, that the amount of the potential claim should start from the day that Charlie Baker made the announcement to close down, which was March 16th, through this period and beyond. And because people are reopening, the claim sort of changes from pure business interruption to then this part of the coverage that's called extra expense, and so that and a period of remediation. So typically what happens is that if a business closes due to a fire, for example, there's a period of time to reconvene at a different site and run your operation. And then there's the period of time after you open your doors again at your new site, where you have the lag in actually allowing people and clients to come back in. So you're not going to be able to open your new location first day and get the same amount of business that you had before. So that's sort of referred to as the period of restoration. So this is not any different from COVID, because obviously as you're opening and you are expecting people to show up, you have no idea what that volume is going to be. You're going to have to dine outside, for example. Again, you don't know what your revenue will be. So it's important to make sure you're looking at your losses from when you were closed to what your potential losses are as you are reopening.
Beth,
So,
we did have one question, and just, I guess it's more in business interruption specifically. How does it help a business owner, I guess, in layman's terms, and like, where would you purchase it? What policy is it a part of? Just to sort of break it out before we get into any more specific details.
Good question. Thank you, Cole, for redirecting me. I appreciate it.
No problem.
The employment or the business interruption coverage usually sits on your package policy or your BOP, your business owner's policy. It's a standard inclusion typically, but you always want to make sure you have it. So, and then there is the ability to buy a standalone business interruption coverage policy. There are some considerations out there that this type of coverage may be available for via a one-off situation, standing outside of your general liability package coverage and outside your BOP, and it would be a single purchase policy. They're still refining whether or not COVID may be included and not included in that, but right now those policies are incredibly expensive. So, like what might be able to, buy a business interruption policy, but your, local small business until there's some policies that are put in place for disease around business interruption. I hope that answered your question. Okay, cool.
Great.
John, Cole, what do we have for a question here?
Sure. So Claudia is asking if it falls under extra expense, does that apply to as a new marketing tool to a small business forced access during COVID? So like expenses for creating a website.
Yes. I'll go back to the true reason why business interruption was created, and this true reason really just doesn't apply anymore, but it is what it is right now in our industry. And that is the direct physical loss piece. So Claudia, if you had a fire and you lost all your back-end infrastructure and you were hosting your website, that would be an expense that's included in your restoration of the business and the extra expense period. So any questions on this? Next slide, Cole, please. This is another sort of area that attorneys are taking apart and trying to, again, find the loopholes, and that is that they believe that there can be some case law and policy-based arguments to support business interruption coverage initiating itself. So, and there's also, as I mentioned, proposed federal and state legislation mandating certain coverages be reinstated. Again, those are all things that are out there, but the more reason why you really should go ahead and file a claim. And I have not been able to find yet a business interruption claim COVID format. I don't know, John, if you have any access to that through your organization, finding a claim form for business interruption associated with COVID. But if we do find that, we will be sure to include that in the slides as John puts them up. So John Koppelman, maybe you could help me look for that down the road, please.
Yeah, I'll check with our people
Okay.
in Wellesley. Yeah.
Thanks. Next slide, Cole. These are just the definitions of business income. It's net income having been earned or incurred to continually normally operate your business. extra expense. We talked about direct physical loss. I believe I touched on period of restoration, and the other piece here is making sure that you have covered cause of loss for all risks or named perils. Some of your forms today might include things like basic coverage, which excludes many of the risks. So again, I'm talking a little bit of language associated with insurance. So any questions, we could take them offline. Okay, I think that's it for business interruption. And now I want to turn it over to Alex. Can you move ahead to Alex's slide? There we go. Alex is going to talk about the ability to potentially save money with your insurance policies.
Thank you, Beth. So yes, as we discussed throughout this, we've talked a lot about business interruption, a lot about business in general. So we don't want to leave out personal insurance, Pearson Walls Insurance. We do personal lines insurance. It's just as important to us. And one nice benefit that we wanted to leave you with, and we thought it tied nicely into reopening, with now people are going to be driving more. As people go back to work, all the regular commutes. As many of you know, a lot of the carriers during the time where people were at home, not driving, a lot of the insurance carriers gave personal auto insurance discounts. Some of you may have received one from your carrier. Arbella Insurance, one of our partners, and we're proud to offer an additional month to some of the other carriers that they kind of stopped everything in May. Arbella is allowing the discount to continue until June 30th, which is awesome. So, you know, it's just, it's another opportunity to save. And if, you know, you've already had your discount, why not try and take advantage again? And we'd be happy to help you do those things. You know, and again, just the importance of what we do on both sides of business and personal. You know, we can't speak enough good words about both lines of business that we write, and we like to try and help all of our business owners with their personal insurance. And, you know, from the transition, I just wanted to also mention that, you know, business owners are not alone out there. If you have questions, it's kind of, you know, we're all going through this together. It's an ever-changing environment. So we're giving you a lot of information today. Obviously, this is being recorded, as well as we're going to get the PowerPoint out. But if you have additional questions, feel free to reach out. We're only a phone call, email away, and we'd be happy to guide you through any of the confusion that you're having in this ever-changing environment. So again, just to recap, Arbella Insurance, one of our great partners, is providing an additional 20% off your auto premium for until June 30th. So, you know, a great time to take advantage of it as people are going back to work, and the discounts are going to be falling off. So we just wanted to throw that in there as people will be driving again and the discount will be going away. So thank you very much.
So just to be clear, Alex, it's for April, May, and June. Is that correct?
Yeah, so if you qualify, if we put a policy, say the policy is effective before the 30th of June, you're going to get a discount for 3 months combined, for 3 months combined. So April, May, and June combined, 20% of your whole policy premium for 3 months. So it's not just 1 month; it is all 3 months of discount, which is amazing. So it's one of the only carriers out there that is offering such a great discount.
So just to clarify, Alex, if I wanted our Arbella policy on June 30th or June 29th, how would that work?
So we'd be able to help you put a policy in place. And from there, you would have your premium as it is. And then what we would do is we would look at the numbers and say, okay, you're going to be saving 20% of those 3 months, even though we're writing the policy in June. So it's very easy to do. We would take all of the hard work off your plate and do the cancellations for you and make sure that everything transitions smoothly into a new Arbella policy, if that's the way that we decided to go.
So it's retroactive to April then, so savings are April, May, and June. Okay, great. So I think the last piece we wanted to talk about briefly, and I know insurance is so dry, but we are rather passionate about it. So that's good. You don't have to be, because we will be. So anyway, the last piece I want to briefly touch on is employment practices liability. It's an important coverage to consider. And again, your typical package policy for a business, or your business owner policy, referred to as a BOP, does usually have a small amount of employment practices liability on it. maybe 10,000. But this is the type of coverage that could potentially, shutter your doors if you do have an issue with employment practices liability. So just to be clear, what that means is it's associated with any wrongful acts by the employer associated with termination, discrimination, sexual harassment, retaliation, invasion of privacy, failure to promote, negligent evaluations, all these important things as employers we make decisions about, and we have to do them consistently across the board and follow the protocol that has been put in place for by the state and federal organizations around employment practices. So the piece specifically around COVID, though, that's really important is to make sure that you are incorporating consistent policies and practices, as John and I've talked about a couple times, that you have potentially to assign a COVID control coordinator, someone that is kind of like your point person, a person that has lots of Q&A experience behind them associated with COVID, and they can just be the point person for the consistency of the rollout and then the consistent follow-up. Because you are doing employee-wide training on this, it just opens up some doors as it relates to making sure your policies and procedures are consistent and that everyone's following those policies and procedures. And then the last piece is that going off the COVID control plan and the training is that if you do have some remediation standards, meaning someone is refusing to wear their mask, or they are taking their mask off and on, or they're pulling it down to the lower part of their face, that needs to be consistently documented in the employee file, just as if they were late to work. So if there is an issue in your organization from a client or a customer who's making a complaint, or someone does get sick or affected by COVID, then to know that you have the in your files, make as it relates to your COVID protection plan. So that's pretty much it for us today. I think we will just have our closing slide, which is how to get in touch with us. I really also thank the Chamber enough. It's really been an amazing organization to work with. I encourage anyone who's not a member to join, or people who are members to reach out to their other business colleagues in their communities and join the Chamber. It's a very inexpensive spend, and it is just so important. It's like, like NPR, this is free programming, and the only way free programming works is through the support of its members and any sort of small donations that you may be able to make to the Chamber in terms of time or any other needs that Claudia and John may have, because these guys are just so powerful. And along with the bid, we have, I think, one of the best communities to do business in. So thank you.
Oh, Beth, thank you so much. John Page is with me as well, our membership and marketing manager. Thank you, John, for coordinating behind the scenes so beautifully and effectively. Thank you to the Pearson Walls team. As I want to end with how Beth started, this is an incredible time and uniquely challenging in so many ways. And Alex and John and Cole and Beth really highlighted some of those very serious challenges that are COVID related. So please continue to ask questions, to submit them, and we will do our best to answer them. And I have been providing resources, and Pearson Walls is clearly one of them. But also, as Beth said, this is a time to rewrite your dreams. The dreams have been shaken and shattered a bit, but they are not completely broken, I hope. And I hope that with these webinars and this series that Pearson Walls is supporting, that we continue to rebuild those dreams. So I walked away with a lot of great detail, even that I need to do for our own chamber staff. So thank you. That was really helpful. I took a lot of great notes. So again, this recording will be available. And just a reminder, we're going to be back here, same bat time, same bat channel next week, June 17th, 10 a.m. It's about PPP. There is some new legislation around loan forgiveness. So if you have taken advantage as a business with PPP and you need to tune in, we will also be recording that, but please sign up. That is being shared. That link is being shared. John will share the link now. So I thank everyone, and thank Pearson Walls for bringing this series to us at this incredibly challenging time. And again, the Chamber, though we are closed physically, we are open for you anytime. So thanks so much. Thanks again, Pearson Wallace team and John. So have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.